Let me call the meeting to order. We have at least a quorum, if not almost everyone here. I miss you guys. Welcome to the September 12th meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Committee. I'm calling the meeting to order. Let's do a roll call first. And Rich, you are taking minutes, correct?
That's correct. My internet connection is being difficult, but I think it's okay now.
Okay, great. Let's go around the room. Carl, present. Carl Simon, present. Pam Hill.
Present.
Kurt Herman. Present. Paul Bowman was present. Court Booth.
Present.
Gary Kleiman.
Muted but present.
And Carrie Flood.
I am here online.
And Rich Feely.
Here,
I think that's everybody on the task force. Did I miss anybody? Look at the gallery. Okay, so we haven't met since August 8th. We have the minutes to discuss later on. So a few things have been happening offline. Before we jump into the agenda, I just want to give you a little bit of update on a couple of newsy things. So the Concord Bridge, also I want to welcome the others. I know Kara from EPA is here, Terry, Matt Robbie, Chris Carmody, Brad Hubbard Nelson, hello, we'll get to you later. Okay, so the Concord Bridge came out with an article. I didn't know it was coming out. I had submitted a piece earlier, which I guess they lost. The article that came out was fine. It had a few inaccuracies that I'm correcting. I did submit the article that's in your package. And the article that's in your package was just intended to sort of basically to talk about the two meetings coming up. EPA is going to get an hour meeting. I gave some background in that article on the task force. And I did want to announce that there's a task force. It's very hard to get these committees and task force names straight. The 2229 Main Street Oversight, the advisory, the old reuse committee, and now our task force. And I think the Concord Bridge mangled those to no harm. They did state a couple of things. One thing I wanted to correct on the record here at the public meeting, and then hopefully in the article, is that our task force is charged to advise the select board on whether or not to acquire the site, and we have a variety of things, right, criteria and work streams to do that. The article implied that our task was to recommend the acquisition. A little subtle difference, but if you read that article, I think the public could say, wait a second, this train is moving down the road and we're not participating. So that correction, that we're evaluating the options for the select board, is secondarily that we are going to invite public input at the meetings. So very important. So the article that hopefully will be published this week, if the Concord Bridge can find it, is kind of corrects both of them. So I just kind of want to leave the articles at that. Any questions on the
Yeah, just observation. You use the word subtle. I don't think that's such a subtle mistake. I think that's a significant mistake. And I think that it should be very clearly noted that that was inaccurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say subtle here on that particular point.
Well, I don't disagree with you. It's
So I think communicating that would be, I think, an important thing.
yeah, little thing to be misunderstood. That's one of the reasons why, and we'll get to the public meeting. I want to make that clear at the public meeting. So that's sort of the articles that appeared there.
Paul, I have a copy here if anyone hasn't seen it and wants to.
Oh, in the Concord Bridge?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We had our meeting on August 8th. We were supposed to have a meeting late in August, and at that meeting, we were going to look at the letters that Rich and Gary had put together. We didn't have a quorum, so that meeting didn't occur, but those letters had to proceed. So I reviewed those, and Megan reviewed those for the town, and those letters did go out to the various departments. And I think Gary under Rich will want to pick up on that during the work stream updates, but I just want to update you on that. That was a sort of a hanging issue that the task force was going to weigh in on, but time time moved ahead, and so those letters went out to the various departments. I just want to give you an update on that. Okay, just one little thing before, so I've been asked a question. And we talked about this at the last meeting a little bit. If the site's not gonna be ready until 2028, what's the rush? Why does the select board even have to weigh in here? So I have a slide that, I'm gonna show to the select board, at the meeting next Monday. I'll get into why that meeting is occurring a little bit later, but. Can you see the slide? Yes, it's up there. Hi.
That was a new record, half an hour from Baker Avenue. Half an hour.
You want to-
I could walk here faster.
I've thought about getting out, except
I
I'm
walked-
recovering from COVID and I can barely make it up the stairs.
Okay, I want to announce for the record that David Ropik has joined us.
Sorry.
And he is present. So this little slide here, I borrowed this concept from McKinsey. We talked about various horizons for various markets, and I think what I want to express here is that there are 3 periods of activity that if the town moves to acquire the site, that I think will occur. We're in this first period here where we're analyzing, reporting, and we're coming up with an acquisition decision, and that the reason why that needs to take place in the time frame that's set out, let's say by 2025, early 25, is because the second phase, Horizon 2, which I call here, once a decision has been made, before there can be any development, there has to be a lot of planning. There has to be a lot of budgeting. There has to be a lot of activity in the town, by separate committees. And once it's decided that the site's going to be acquired, if it's going to be acquired, and there are decisions of various options, what to do with the site, there has to be planning, there has to be implementation of this. And that's going to take a couple of years, I think. A couple of years of budgeting. So again, this is period where in order to take advantage of the site in 2028, there's a planning period. And then when we get to 2028, is the Horizon 3, the implementation and the development. So in short, in order for something to happen, it's at the end of the decade, 2028 or so, there's this planning period in the interim, which I think is really important. Therefore, I think it's incumbent upon the select board to make this decision in the time frame that we're talking about to allow for that planning to occur. So that's just sort of my concept slide, which I just want to.
I think there's one other point to make too, which is we can influence some of what's done with the site during the cleanup process to reduce the town's costs. And the clearer we are as to what we want to see happen there, more feedback we can give. So there's the cost savings
Yeah,
for the
that,
town involved in being ready earlier rather than later. I mean, that's maybe a secondary issue, but it is something we.
yeah, I showed that to Horizon 2. Those
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
what's the decision, maybe we can work with EPA and yes, take advantage of their costs to help us in the future. So that's a very good point. Yeah.
I think that there's also a question that I think Kurt and I are working on, which is, what things have to be secure before we acquire. For example, if we did a prospective purchase agreement on this resolution of domains, how much does that need to happen and be closed off before acquisition becomes viable and reasonable? And I think we need to work to understand that. For example, the process of if you did a prospective purchaser agreement, and Kurt jump in if you think I'm misstating anything, but that has to go through probably the US Department of Justice, and that can be an extremely long process. And so we need to work, I think, from Kurt and my angle, we need to work at, what are the particular things that need to be secured in advance of acquisition? And what does that do to our sense of the timeline? Kurt, is that right or no?
I think you're accurate. Thank you. And I think there's one other piece which is going to come up quickly in the public arena, and that is, does a decision to acquire earlier instead of later change the liability calculations or the exposure for the town? And so far, we're hearing that the answer is no, it doesn't change it. That we don't burden ourselves further with liability implications with a decision to ultimately acquire earlier instead of post cleanup.
Well, I think I think that's a really good point, because, the acquisition has to occur, and that doesn't occur that occurs after the decision's made to move down that track. You know, at that point, the select board would say, okay, we have a pathway to acquire, now we have to do that, so yeah.
Right, so what is?
The second period is gonna take
What
time.
is the pathway and what, so, yeah, and what, a
Exactly.
big part of our job as a task force is to describe how long it will take to be in a secure, efficient position to acquire.
Exactly, no, thanks for those additions,
A small thing along the lines of your concept chart, I wonder whether in our report to the select board, we ought to put some time expectations. This process is gonna take, you know, a year and a half, or 2 years, some actual specifics to what we've learned it's gonna take to do these steps as a guide to them when we make our report. Just put those metrics as best we know them in as a guide for their planning.
Can I just add to that, that is exactly what Kurt and I are talking to Kat about, that certainly from the legal point of view, we want a timeline of what is the sequence, and sequentially and over time, how long might all this take? I mean, one of the questions, for example, I've asked, this generally is, what is the priority of the site for the US EPA and the Department of Justice? If it's a low priority site in the scheme of things, so that's really, that's great news. But that's something I think we need to know that, is it in the priority scheme of things? And Kat's sort of indication is that it is probably, but those are the kinds of things, but I think your point on timelines for legal and other things is very valuable.
Just having that laid out concretely for them.
Visual.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's really important, I think, that's a whole section, or each subsection is a timeline. But it's really what to do next, and what's our advice on the timeline, I think, very important. So, yeah, let me, very quickly, the reason why Megan and I are talking to the select board on Monday, it relates to these funding requests. For both legal funding and risk funding. I wanted to defer that topic to a little later on the agenda, but that's why I'm talking to the select board on Monday. They finally got it on the agenda to discuss these funding requests. Okay, work stream updates. I think we started to do that, but let me start with legal. And this is just between meetings, what's happening.
Quickly, I mean, as indicated, Cord and I had a good conversation with Kat on the phone. She gave some basic background on.
This is Kat West from Skio.
Yeah, from Skio. We talked a little bit about the relationship of Skio to us, and the relationship of Skio and us to the town council, and then my view of the sensitivities of those relationships. We also talked about timelines and generally where we're headed. We hit a couple of things that are going to be of interest to everyone. For example, court jump in. I mean, one is resolution of the Superfund liens will cost money, and how much is the town willing to spend on that? That's just an example of some of the issues that came up. But we're sort of moving along and in large measure waiting for direction from the select board on our access to the town council too, because I think we need to have a conversation with them. Court, anything else?
I would add, Pam, you've been instrumental in making very clear that, I'm getting an echo, I don't know if everybody is, that Kat brings us legal information, not legal advice. A really bright line was created there, and everybody understands it. So it's going to enable Pam and I to be considerably informed by the time we sit down with council.
Yeah, I think so. You guys are making progress, even though the town council is not fully funded to do this yet. I knew that was going to happen, but at some point, you guys have to.
No, that's what's happening, and again, the main thing is access to the town council, because I think that's where the legal advice is coming from.
Right.
We've got to be very careful to thread that needle in a way that respects the town council.
Right. And there's, of course, a challenge how any and all of this appears in the report. what's open and advisory and what's legal opinion. So we'll face that down the road on that. Okay, any questions for the legal team? Okay.
Well, a question from the legal team is the one that is on the table, and that is, to Pam's point, when do we foresee the select board, town manager will have us, in the room with council? But that'll come, we know.
Well, the process starts on Monday, and we're going to seek the funding, and how quickly it's gonna happen after that, I don't know. Maybe Megan and Carrie will know after that, but we'll know pretty soon.
In due time, yeah.
Because of the time crunch, how about the reuse work stream, Rich and Gary, updates?
Yeah, sorry, I have to go in 10 minutes, so I'll start and then pass off to Rich and Matt. But just to say that, as you already pointed out, yeah, we did want to start collecting data so that we have more information to make an informed argument about what kinds of uses may or may not be appropriate at the site. So we did send out those letters. We followed up and set up some appointments, including this week. I'm meeting actually with somebody from the Economic Vitality today, transportation planning on Thursday, and then I haven't heard back from Light Plant, and I'll pass over to Rich as to 3 other work groups that he's trying to coordinate with.
I have appointments with Council on Aging and Recreation. I haven't heard back from Alan Cathcart, but I'll rattle his cage later this week. So we're moving forward with that. SKIO now has a number of the town planning documents that are relevant, and I think the next thing, besides pulling together the interview notes in a way that the task force can digest them, is to start talking to some developers. And once we finish with the town, I think that's the next place we'd go. And I do have, I've made notes on the suggestions that people had after our last meeting in which this was discussed, in terms of what kinds of developers to talk to and what questions to ask. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, and I think supporting that work stream, and I didn't realize you guys had a meeting today, so I will send you over the little. We've been going through, I don't know, a list of probably about 8 to 10 planning documents and existing materials to get some sort of baseline conditions around the different sectors that might align with different land uses. And so that kind of ranges from housing to recreation to commercial, industrial, to municipal facilities, and then to public services. And so based on all the information that we've compiled, we have sort of like baseline conditions and kind of trends, sort of like sector trends that we think are kind of like highlights that would be really useful for Rich and Gary to have, just kind of as a cheat sheet for the conversations they're having. And also maybe for the whole committee to have as like, oh, okay, here are some high points and things to consider when we're talking about each of these uses and what the condition of those types of uses are community wide. So that's what we've been doing to support that. Yeah.
Okay. Just one heads up, I have a little bit insight on the recreation side. The recreation director has resigned, and right in the middle or towards the end of the recreation strategic plan, the recreation strategic plan does mention the 2229 site fairly prominently as sort of a future asset. So that's going to be in the plan. But that plan won't be coming out for a while, and approaching the recreation department, I couldn't even tell you right now who to approach right at the moment. It's in a bit of a flux. So, although that's a very key contact. So I'll if I get any information on that, Rich and Gary, I'll let you know.
Yeah, because I just, Anna McCune we just set a date for, I think it's next week sometime. Are you suggesting we not meet with her?
Wow.
I think it still might be useful to get her perspective even as the outgoing director, no?
I think so, I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll keep that.
Yeah, I mean, she does speak to the needs of the department, even though unfortunately she's leaving. Yeah, go ahead. I'm glad you have that set up before she's leaving to get her insight. Thank you. Court,
Yeah, just a thought, would we want to call in the head of the Recreation Commission as well? So we have that path forward after Anna leaves.
yeah, well, I'm on the Recreation Commission. We have a meeting on the 26th, which is one of the conflicts I have on that day. We're gonna, the answer is yes, Court. It's just, Rich, I would proceed with the meeting with Anna and then we'll take it from
Fine.
there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, just picking up on Court's point, if you might think about board chairs generally, the light board, conversations with boards as opposed to directors, or in addition to, is just something to keep in mind. Especially, I would think, maybe the light board. The other thing, and this is not exactly on point, but because Matt was talking a minute ago, I just want to remind us of my request, and I think Matt said it can be done, is to give us a list of the municipalities that have declined to acquire Superfund sites, NPL sites. I'm not talking about brownfield, I'm talking about NPL sites. And I think you said way back that was something that could be done. And I think it'd be a useful thing sometime in the future to have a sense of whether such towns exist and why they declined. I'm just refreshing your memory.
Yes, we did talk about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's something that I'll pass on to Kat and have her kind of report out to your work stream. I think that'd probably be the best way to do that. But
Yeah, that's fine. It's
sounds
just
good.
it's data that could inform other work streams, I think.
Yep.
Maybe it's a null set, I don't know.
that's an interesting question, are there sites that were never even considered by a municipality, or are there other sites where after consideration, there's declination? I don't know if the information has a granular level of detail, but I'll leave it up to SKIO and EPA.
Well, the reason I mentioned that is because I think you expressed
Yeah.
a willingness and ability to get that data for us.
Yes, I mean, we could, honestly, a lot of that would be anecdotally from practice, from the situations where, when presented with an opportunity, but not necessarily an unending amount of hand-holding, communities have said, we're going to put our resources elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be overwhelmingly the kind of information we get, we're able to report on. But there are cases where communities will have said, oh, the conditions under which we would acquire this are unacceptable and we're just not going to do it.
Yeah. And as I said, it might be the null set. I'd just like a little bit of scrubbing on that, yeah.
Hold on a second. Yes. One last thing on recreation, the chair of the Recreation Commission is Phil Griffiths. So you may want to get in touch with Phil on the question about approaching the commission, Phil Griffiths.
Okay.
David.
To the extent that those folks are going to be reaching out to members of the community as opposed to employees of the town staff, it would be a perfect overlap with the public engagement piece to know what those board people say. So can I ask you guys, or you people who are doing that, if anything sounds relevant to what our public engagement strategy needs, just pass that on as extra input to me who's reaching out to folks. There's more folks who are being reached out to. Totally overlap.
Thank you.
Sure, makes sense.
Thank you.
Right now, the
Okay,
focus
Gary.
is on professional staff though, but yeah, as we get into board chairs, we'll keep that in mind.
Gary, feel free to sign up when you have to. If you disappear, we'll know why.
Thanks.
So legal reuse, economics and
Right, we've been working really on elaborating in more detail what the different cost items are associated with development and operation of the site. And then working on what town departments then would be responsible for those activities and investments. And then questions we would pose to the town departments to help us try and develop estimates around it. So I've drafted some of that, and it's being reviewed. We also met with Matt and one of his colleagues at SKIO just to kind of talk about what support they could provide to our work stream. I know we're also doing a little bit of research. We've done some outreach to Walpole on what their experience has been, because the town manager there had some experience in Concord. So I think, at a subsequent meeting, after Carrie and SKIO and Pam review the questions and stuff, we'll bring that back to the committee to get feedback. That we'll be doing a series of letters, town departments, to get cost information at some point. And we probably want to coordinate that so we're not like overburdening them.
Well, I was gonna mention that, coordinating with the reuse work stream, so.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe you have the same meeting,
But it sounds like
Something
they're
you guys
moving
had to do that.
pretty quickly.
yeah,
I've talked about coordinating an early meeting, but people, are moving ahead, but that's all right. I mean, we'll figure it out. I think, maybe, once they're, it looks like they're moving pretty quickly. So if the reuse committee meetings kind of happen and they get information back in a month or two, then we could follow on, because I think we're gonna find a lot of, I wouldn't say resistance, but uncertainty as well, what's actually gonna be developed and where and at what level and how that affects some of the cost issues. So there may be some value, in while making the town departments aware of this. It might be iterative, and having more information from the reuse team may ultimately be necessary to get better quality information from the town as well.
I saw was a very good set of questions. There are some of it's hypothetical in terms of what's going to be done at the site. There are some things, infrastructure at the site for any use, roads and utilities and stormwater,
Right, yeah, that has to happen.
That has to happen. So getting economic cost information on just that.
Right, and those are gonna be the most significant costs, I think, ultimately. And my thought was to give them a copy of the master plan. These are the areas of the site we anticipate may get developed. That's where infrastructure has to get extended to. So work with that master plan as you think about developing your cost estimate.
It's my intent to create a memo on, from each of the discussions, and we'll provide that to you along with whatever, information we or SKIO found that we think is relevant, as soon as we can get it together.
What do you think about the possibility of, Carl, you just sharing like 3 questions that Rich and Gary can ask that would get at some of the cost information? And maybe it is that it's too iterative and you need the input from the reuse work stream to form the cost, but.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm also, there may be some value in having, since there are very distinct questions. One is about future departments' needs and how the site might accommodate it.
Yeah.
And the other questions are, as a sort of operating town entity that would fund these, have to undertake these services improvements, what do you think it would cost you? So I don't know, I'm not sure. I think there's value in separating the two and having 2 separate
I see.
conversations.
I think it's fine to have a phased dialogue, and when we meet with these people, we can just let them know, at some point in the future, our colleagues on a different work stream will also reach out. We're just trying to gather data so that we have a baseline assessment for what kinds of uses might be useful, with you, but others may follow up as we get more into the process about, detailed costing, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, no, I actually think a second interview with the costing group is good. I think in most cases, ultimately, we'd want to follow up after we had started to rule some things out and in anyway. So anyhow, yeah, let's plan on 2 meetings, but we'll say when we talk to people that there will be a second request later on from the costing group.
Okay. One, one topic that we've exchanged some information on that straddles a couple of work streams. The institutional controls. And I know, I talked to Terry Ackerman about this. There's, I guess there's a combination of concern and lack of clarity and definition on the institutional controls. So I want to put that on the agenda for one of our next meetings, to just kind of talk about what we know about the institutional controls and how those might be managed, and who would manage them, and what other towns' experience are. I think we need a whole robust topic. Right now, it's in your, Carl and Carrie, that's in your, because it's post ownership liability, post ownership obligations.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues I know we're grappling with is, how does ownership affect those costs and responsibilities of the town? Because, the institutional controls are gonna have to be in place, independent of who owns the site. And so the town may get drawn into response issues, or having an oversight role just from a public health and safety, point of view. Even if it doesn't own the site. So I think, so anyway, that's just one of the things.
Yeah, okay.
We're trying to better sort out.
I just want to put that out there. That's
Right,
a topic that I
Yeah.
think it's worthy of a robust discussion.
Now, one last thing, the institutional controls, robust discussion is a great idea, and I think just to tee it up a little more, I think defining what they are as opposed to environmental controls, and the difference between institutional controls and operation and maintenance responsibilities under the consent decree, and then, various other aspects of it, but I think that there can be confusion on O&M, and institutional and environmental can get all mushed up. So I think this is a very good conversation to have.
Well, yeah, and there's at least 2 buckets of potential liability. One is legacy liability, which relates to the acquisition terms. Then there's future liability of the town. This is in the future bucket, so it's a lot. It's rather the liability boundaries as well. So.
Yeah, and also, this is not to be redundant, but the consent decree describes responsibilities that are retained by the responsible parties in the context of very important cap oversight, all that stuff, which could be considered an institutional control. I think it's important for us to be getting advice from the town council on what the retained responsibilities of the PRPs are.
Good. David,
Are you looking at the other side of the ledger?
The revenue side,
Correct.
I mean, not.
So the town's gonna make a decision
right.
about what the net cost.
Right,
of
right.
this
I mean,
is, but
Not at this point. At some point that will become
Okay, cool.
necessary, but I think it's too,
early's fine.
I mean, you don't know what the uses are. I mean, if the town decides to retain the whole site for town purposes, then there's no revenue, right? So, I think at some point that will.
That's on the
become- That will become an issue.
Because
And
the
then-
net cost is
Right.
really question.
Yeah, and that also comes into the funding options, because obviously, how the town uses any net revenue to fund some of the, infrastructure improvements and
Well,
operations.
even just a glance at that, that's really important. I mean, if you decide on light commercial, you have some revenue coming in terms of
Right.
taxes and stuff. So I mean, just even a light pass over.
Well,
those-
that won't be hard to do, won't be that difficult to do once we know. It just seems like it's a waste of time at this point in the process.
well, I think that it stems out of the reuse. Because right now we've been talking about reuse, municipal, talking about the towns. We also have to talk at some point to commercial, potential commercial.
I just wanted to put that on the table.
Right,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, no, I'm aware of that. It's
Yeah.
just, it seems like it's too early in the process.
Yeah.
To do that. Yeah.
there's, okay. So last but not least is the risk communication work stream. I want to, with your permission, I want to flip the agenda a little bit, and item 4, which is the letter to the town manager on the request for additional funds for risk work. that, that seems to be part of what you guys are dealing with right now, so why don't we, if you can update us on. On that work stream, and also we can talk about the letter,
Okay.
which is out there for review and approval.
So we've been coordinating with Rue Associates and the town to help guide their reuse risk assessment. Rue is still at a relatively early stage in that. They're kind of getting their hands around what work has been done already and what data are out there that they're going to need to consider in their reuse risk assessment, and just come up with an overall approach that will help the task force in its decisions on redevelopment. What might be appropriate, what to recommend to the select board. There's a meeting later today with EPA and Maximus, where Rue is going to try to find out what data are available, in what format, to help streamline their efforts in implementing the reuse risk assessment.
And to add one thing to that, particularly to the Maximus, trying to find out what data are available that are the most current. Because there's some databases, but they're years old.
Yeah.
So they're gonna press on, ask about what's the most up-to-date data on.
Right, so there was I think it's a 2013 human health risk
Right.
assessment that was performed. That's the basis for the record of decision and the remedy. But that's 10 years ago, and there's been design work, there's been remedy work, so Rue wants access to the data that's been collected in the last 10 years to incorporate to their reuse risk assessment. And then, because of the timing of the remedy, they're going to need to make some assumptions about what work has been done as part of the remedy, and assume that cleanup goals have been reached and factored that into the risk assessment as well. It's just because of the timing. If the remedy was done before the risk assessment was done, then we could actually have the data that exists.
Isn't that really at the heart of what we're doing, we're looking at what. After cleanup, what the status of the site is going to be in various areas.
Yeah,
Isn't that so?
that's the heart of it. And they're looking at it from a lens of least restrictive use. So if it's safe for the least restrictive use, if you have a more restrictive use, then it would be safe for that as well. And I think the current thinking is that they're looking at residential use as the least restrictive use, just for the risk assessment purposes. Not to say that will be the actual use, but that's what they're doing as a starting point.
And that means in concrete terms, I was asking about this yesterday. You can play in the soil. You know, I think Kurt asked about can you garden?
Can you eat
So
the
that-
dirt?
that sort of
Can you eat the dirt?
Yeah. So that's standard. That's what that means in concrete, real people language.
Yeah, so some digging around in the dirt, you can grow vegetables.
Can your kids play in the backyard?
Can
Yeah.
your kids ingest it?
Yep.
So that's, right.
Yeah, that's the starting point at least, and I think they'll be in a position maybe in a couple of months to give an update if we wanted for this group. I don't think they're there yet, they're making progress, but I think today's meeting is gonna be pretty important to set what the level of effort for their work is going to be.
Do you see their work as being included in our report, separate in our report? You know, how does their findings and conclusions enter into our report to the select board? And have you talked about that? Have you thought about that?
Just in a preliminary sense, yesterday I had floated the idea of they would have a report or a technical memorandum documenting their findings, standalone document that could be an attachment to our report. And then David and I would draft a section of the report relying on the Rue work, but it would be in our own words.
Two additional thoughts on that. We talked yesterday about the tasks that they have budgeted for and the additional ones. This gets to the letter question and the funding question. So 1, 2, and 3, the tasks 1, 2, and 3 for Rue are that getting the data, finding out what's what compared to the past data, and now task 4 and 5, which would be additional, and Chris passed on what they sent yesterday in terms of what that might cost, are the reporting back out to the select board and us and so forth, compiling all of that and putting that in a presentation form, which they haven't been able to cost out so far, because they don't know what they're working with. So that's 4 and 5, and that's what starts to spring the need for some extra money. There's 6 and 7, which is public engagement, which you can talk about separately. But in terms of public engagement, the risk communication point, Rue's report to us is important for trust. So they're an outside additional analytical voice that however we present it, we just haven't relied on ourselves, we've gone to the pros to give us additional wisdom about safety and risk and those sorts of questions, so it counts towards that too, however we incorporate it.
And on the funding piece, as I understand it, Rue submitted a proposal back in April. Tasks 1 through 3 were funded in part by the town and by a Mass DEP tag grant or something like that. And so they're requesting additional funds to cover the rest of the reuse risk assessment. And then they also included some placeholders, a range for helping with public outreach.
Yeah, if we choose to also incorporate them into the public outreach, they suggested a very wide range of what that might additionally cost. But at the moment, we're talking about the letter with 4 and 5.
Yeah, can we talk about the letter? Do we want to put up the letter, or do you want to? You know, the letter explains it's from us, me, to Carrie and the select board about why Rue's supporting us and what they're doing and why they need additional funds beyond the tag grant. So the initial scope is clear, right? There's a commitment to the task 1, 2, and 3, which goes beyond the Mass DEP funding. My question is, what number goes in this report? And I'm gonna have, Megan and I are gonna have to go before the select board and defend this number. And if you review the legal letter that did go out, it talked about what MENA needed up until the point of making the acquisition decision, but then we deferred additional funds for later legal issues to actually acquire site, because we didn't know what that was. So the funding request was up to the point of making a
It
decision.
was a modest request, I thought.
Excuse me?
I thought it was a
It
very,
was a modest request,
very modest.
but it wasn't,
Modest, maybe.
it wasn't the full request.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want to be transparent with the select board that whatever we say, this is gonna take us to the point of whatever the point is, and that's why these tasks to be determined, they still lead up to the acquisition, so we have to put a number on this, because we're not gonna get 2 shots. I don't believe we're gonna get 2 shots, Megan, correct me if, yeah.
I think it's in everyone's best interest to what you're able to do is present what you think you need to accomplish the task at hand. That's, so I think to the extent that you have the information, making the request for the budget for this group at one time is my recommendation.
As comprehensively as possible.
I think so, right? I mean, that you're charged with, you have a charge. It includes exploration and, we're trying to get, we got grants for 20,000 of it. That it does include some legal pieces, so I think you should try to ask for the money that you think you need to do the job. Correctly.
Hedging where you have to hedge. I mean, it may be that it's, I mean, you can't have a hard number in certain, I mean, I'm, for example, concerned about what is gonna come back from MENA in writing, what's not, and all of those things that can become, if you're on an hourly, I don't know how we're even paying it, and whether, things like whether Kurt, Court and I should be mindful that we have 5 hours with it.
Yeah, I think
Because he's $500 an hour.
I mean, so I think the bottom line here is there isn't a budget for this. It was not appropriated. So we are to try to find the money, we need to know how much money to try to find. That's why I'm here. This is the big
But
picture.
hedging where you have to hedge it.
That's a great, you write that down, that's a great.
So
I could use that again.
to be specific, Rue is quoting another $14,500 for tasks 4 and 5.
Yeah, we could try.
So that's one element, the legals is another, but that's a number that they had given us.
Yeah.
Okay. We would clearly have to hedge on whether we need their help with public engagement, at least through the November meeting, because we don't know what the community engagement needs are gonna be. If it's a real low key thing, less. If it's a real high profile thing, which is unlikely, but could happen, probably more. I don't think personally that we really need to plan on their advice and help on public engagement down the road. So my advice would be that we don't incorporate their range of $25,000 to $90,000 on task 6 and 7. So concretely, the 14.5 is the room request for 4 and 5, tasks 4 and 5.
That's the test 4 and 5 again, or what?
Finalizing the data collection and putting it into and reporting it to the us and the select board. Is that about?
Yeah, so that would take them through completion of the draft reuse risk assessment, including presentation to the select board, and
Okay.
factoring in comments to that.
Okay.
So I think that's a reasonable level of effort to complete.
And in terms of defending that extra 14.5, thinking about you being in front of people. Task 1 through 3 are finding out what it is they need to know and filling in those blanks as well as possible, but they can't budget 4 and 5, that's why they're asking for extra money until they do that.
I would agree with David that tasks 6 and 7 are too preliminary at this point to really know, and that's the public outreach.
And even in terms of being comprehensive, which is a good idea, and we talked about this yesterday with Drew, ask for as much as you think you're gonna need when you get your asking in. I don't foresee needing much help on public engagement, just based on the tenor of where things stand at the moment. Now, I have to do a lot more homework on that prior to the November meeting, which has been set, so that was, in my mind, that was. There's doing the research for the meeting and then there's the meeting, so the meeting has now been set, so that's step 2 in my head. But there's some time before the meeting.
We'll talk about the meeting.
Yeah, but there's time before the meeting to do that research, and unless something radically different turns up in that, I don't think that extra money is necessary to ask.
Okay, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, if we're trying to be as comprehensive in terms of how much funding we need. I mean, I think it's hard to say at this point the request represents the final request for any financial support that the task force activities would involve. I'm just thinking about my work. What if we go to all the town departments and they say, well, in order for us to estimate these costs, we need some engineering support, some outside engineering support, or something like that, right? I mean, I'm just not certain that we know now everything we should need in terms of outside financial support. So I was a little uncomfortable with having that sentence at the end of that first paragraph.
Yeah, along those lines, I'm not certain of the form of contract with Drew Associates, but if there's a real curveball in the data that they're not expecting and the level of effort is more significant, maybe they come back to the town and ask for more funding. So I don't know if there's contingency that can be built in.
Well, I think we do have to build in some contingency, so I mean, my internal calculator has. We need 18,000 to get us back to task 3 or change, and we need 14,000 more, that's 32,000, we need some contingency. Having 20% in there, taking up to 40,000 in total. I hate to kind of jump to the conclusion, but is that kind of, we need to put a number in there. For discussion and then defend that, and is that number, so that
The 18th is legal.
no, the 18. They've submitted costs of 38,000, of which 20 is being covered by the Mass DEP. So the town is sitting out there for 18,000, but that's committed. And then you're asking 14,000 more, which is 32,000. If you want to build in some contingency, that takes a little higher than that.
Sounds about right to me, and that gives us some contingency in case there is some element of public outreach we want to just use that as a resource.
Can I just, and this is totally off topic, I'm sorry, but the letter that went out on the legal, I wasn't at the meeting, I wasn't really up to speed on this. I have absolutely no idea how we do things with the town council. I don't, for example, how much did Estabrook cost? What was the budget? What does the town typically spend on very important legal services? Do we do an hour? Is it hourly with Mina? And what is his hourly rate? And what is his rate for his paralegals? And I mean, all that stuff. I have no idea. And I do worry that, we're gonna have to pay for this up pretty seriously, and we're gonna need a lot of, and I don't feel like I was engaged in any kind of discussion about this that makes me comfortable even talking to Nina with Core, because I don't even know, I know it can get really expensive really quickly. So just a little a request that I don't feel that I have my hands around how much you're willing to spend as a town for legal costs based on other examples like the big ticket items like Esty Brook. Nor do I know what your expectations of Court of me are as we've had conversations or what we should expect out of MENA in terms of written documentation
Yeah.
compared to oral documentation, which is very different. Anyway, no one said.
To that, I mean. So the town budgets a certain amount for legal every year. There are expensive lawsuits that we deal with,
Yeah,
and that eats up a lot of our budget.
Yeah.
This was not budgeted, so there is no budget for this, but we did ask Nina how much he thought it would cost.
oh, okay.
He gave us a number, right? Was it like 20,000, I thought? And so he said he thought he could answer these questions in $20,000.
Okay, that's
So
good.
then how would we handle it? I mean, if we get funding for this, then we would have to be careful about, the amount would be like a not to exceed, and it would have to kind of navigate how we're incurring those costs.
Yeah.
But one thing I'd like to ask you, Paul, if that's okay, is I'm just trying to make sure I have a sense of the numbers here. So it was 38,000 for Rue for tasks 1 through 3. The town got a $20,000 grant, so the town has already funded $18,000 for those tasks, right? Now for tasks 4 and 5, it's $14,500 that is unfunded to date. We are seeking another grant, but like right now, we don't have that grant yet. And then, so for legal, is that right that it was like 20? Is that the right number? I don't have it, sorry, but, so that was 20. So I think then you want to build in contingency, you said, right? So, but the actual dollars for the 2 things that we've identified is $34,500. That's the money required for tasks 4 and 5 and for the legal that has been identified.
Yeah, but there's still 18,000 task 1, 2, and 3, which
That's been committed already.
we don't have to ask for that?
No.
Really?
That contract is signed. We have,
Okay,
that has been paid for.
oh,
Cause
okay,
that's, we paid for that already. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's part of the whole picture, but I wouldn't, we've already signed the contract and the funds have already been.
okay, so we don't have to ask the select board. You were carrying on that to ask for that, so you're right, then, it's 20,000 plus 14,500 plus contingency, so. So on the risk side. We have 14,500 plus their contingency. How much you wanna put in contingency for that?
Well, for 4 and 5, I mean,
Yeah.
that's write a report and present a report. Right,
There, you know,
is there a lot of
I think
contingency in
we,
that? I don't know.
That's what the functions are, that they basically, that's very simply what they described 4 and 5.
Present to
being.
the select board.
I think the contingency is more on tasks 1 through 3 and completion of that.
Yeah, I mean, the contingency they brought up yesterday was tying GIS coordinates to different data areas on the site. And so we're having a discussion today with the EPA about what that data looks like, but it's possible that could be additional work that we may have to perform.
My suggestion would be to apply contingency to the full amount of their scope. So that in case there is, again, a curveball with the data, which definitely happens with this kind of site, that there's sufficient funding to cover it.
What's that mean in terms of a number?
Oh, 15 to 20% on the total cost, which
so we went to a 3.
1 through 5.
That's 52.
42,000.
But if presumably they don't have to spend more time writing the report and presenting. Right, that.
Unless
It seems like it's more tasks 1 through 3 where they contingency for 5.
Yeah, so maybe it's 8 to 10 paying contingency on top.
I want them to be available and not, you know, if we ask them to do something or something comes up. So let's look, I'm a consultant, you're a consultant, you know, you don't wanna be so tightly scoped that you can't provide service. I don't wanna put Rue in that bind, so. The number in the letter, of risk, I think should be 20K. I'd put that at 20K. They said they need 14,500, absolutely, this.
Well, Chris made a good point. the task force 5 are unlikely to have a lot of contingency, and that's writing stuff up. Presenting, that's a kind of pretty knowable number. Kurt's point is well taken, that the what ifs lie in 1 and 3, so the percentage we add to the numbers on the 38. Is that go, am I doing the math right? The 38 is their first 1 through 3,
Yes.
right? So if that's where the what ifs are, that is where the consultant extra
That's what.
probably ought to be dedicated. As you're making the case for this money, Paul, that's mentally, that's what it seems to me.
What number should we have in the letter?
I would suggest the 14.5 to fund task 4 and 5, and then an additional 7.5 for contingency for the overall scope. And that makes the total funding 60K for the reduced risk assessment.
Okay, but for this letter, it's 22,000. It's 22 for this letter.
But
The purpose of the letter is 22.
It's 42, because it's legal and approved, right.
Yes, I'm just,
yeah.
we have the separate letter. Letter 1 has 20,000. Letter 2, which is the one I need to send to Carrie. I think I still need to send to Carrie.
I think what I'm hoping to do, and sorry to insert myself in this process, but, I think. And I don't know if you need to vote on it, but I'm trying to take the numbers and have a 1-page budget of this program. What has been the grant funded, what has already been appropriated, and what the request is, and the line items there. So for line items, I have tasks 4 and 5, 14,500. Contingency, 7,500, legal, 20,000. And then I'll already say, you know, a grant for 20 and ARPA for 18 for tasks 1 through 3. That's
The other
all right.
part, the 7.5 contingency is on, it's not on the 14.5, it's on the whole contract. Because it looks like a big number, yeah, 14.5 and 50% contingency, it's really not 50%.
Yeah, you could call it not just 1 through 3 or 5, they won't even know what that is, we could call it the whole contract, right?
I would agree with that.
Okay, good, I'd like a motion to, I want to vote on that, so. Was anybody paying attention to that list? Want to make a motion?
I'll move that we submit this letter requesting $22,000, 14,500 for tasks 4 and 5, and an overall contract contingency of 7,500. And that we also support the prior request for $20,000 for legal services.
Okay, do I have a second?
Well, I just,
A
on
question
the
about
legal, the legal is, I just hope we have some wiggle on that, because I don't know, the budget. Is this going to like the FinCom and everything? How does this, is this going to, we can amend these things in the future, right? If we
So-
need to, I mean, how locked are you on this?
There is $0.
Right, got it.
Right, like,
Yeah.
and so. We're gonna have to try to. I think the reason it's going to the select board is because it's not in this fiscal year. We are planning for next fiscal year. I don't know if the timing lines up for your report. Does that kind of, like, if there is to be funds and, you know, that wouldn't really work for you if it's available July 1 of the next July. So I think the town manager is gonna be exploring other ways to try to fund this. So when you're talking wiggle room, like, I can't say, oh, sure, there's a well of money. It's not, we don't have it put in there, and that's how we operate, is we work with our budget. So this is a request that is outside of our typical budgeting process.
Right.
But is this request gonna go to FinCom? I guess it depends on, it depends on what the solution is to try to fund it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to.
So, I mean, FinCom has the authority to approve, year-end transfers that are special. And this would be outside of that scope as we're talking about it right now, so, right, so it's possible.
They may have already,
they do-
they advise.
They have their own bucket of funding they can authorize, FinCom does. But this is outside of the scope of
Yeah.
what they.
Is it possible at this point in the category of contingency to have a number that covers both work streams?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ours.
So his motion is both work streams. Do we need to separate them as legal and other, or?
No, I want one motion to support the funding request from the task force. Forget the 2 letters.
Okay,
which I still have to. I don't have to write the second letter now, I think I have to.
that's what I was asking. Okay, good.
So this is the whole request. So I'm asking, I'm sorry, the motion's still out there. We're discussing the motion right now. My question is that 7.5 a contingency just cover the roof part or both? And if not, should we amend that?
Both being legal and.
Both the legal and the,
Well, your calculation was not to include legal, that was your 15% over your own.
Yeah, that was up based on the
The
roof.
motion includes the 20 legal. As you stated it, the motion includes both.
right, now we said that Lena submitted the budget. The budget, he knows he has to work with us and. He's done this before, so.
That's where the number comes from, the 20 number comes from.
And if I were submitting budget, I'd say that. He didn't expressly say this contingency in my number, but. He's an experienced guy, so.
Well, first of all, I second a motion that would be inclusive of both numbers. So that is what's also on the table, so that I didn't know whether that officially needed to be.
We did, I was looking for a second.
But the contingency is based on just the room number. If you want to build in anything for legal, then you need to, sorry, yeah, I'm sorry.
His motion included the 20 for legal.
But the,
I guess the notion is that town council has looked at our request
right,
and submitted a budget for 20,000, saying that they're able to address the request we made for 20,000, so.
go for
Yeah, I mean,
For it.
you know.
Okay.
Those was 7.5 for the room and the 20 for the legal.
Chris, do you have the first letter? Was it 20 or 25 that went in the first letter to Carrie? I thought it was 20. It was 20? Yeah. Okay, check that. We're just checking on that.
Could your secretary ask you exactly what motion is on the floor? There's been a lot of interesting discussion. I'm not sure I can capture it all.
Again, I'm gonna ask Carl to repeat, even though there's been a motion that's been seconded. It's gotten lost here a little bit, so I'm gonna ask Carl to repeat the motion. Again, but I'm just asking Chris to check on the letter that went to Carrie and the legal request. Wasn't fair.
well, maybe they should be separated. I mean, the thing that caught me was you added in a piece of your motion that would have swept in the legal. This is a separate motion, isn't it? That is about.
It's swept in because Megan we have to meet with the select board, Megan's putting together a summary. And I want to support her summary. And it makes sense, because this is a request from the task force. For support, 2 pieces, but it's 1 request.
You asked for a range, so in your letter, you said based on early discussions with town council, town staff have received preliminary estimate of 20 to 25,000, the above mentioned tasks and support the task force items.
Yeah, so it's 25,000.
Yeah.
25, okay. 25,000,
Now we're looking at 47, this is total.
okay.
But that was our request, or was that Nina's recommendation? I thought you said.
So that was my request to Carrie. I could arrange on it. Because I understood there's some need for moving it.
Understood, but what I understand is the town council said 20 is probably what it was. Oh, he left it in the range.
I think so.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah,
He said, that's what he said, we are asking for 25.
Okay.
If I'm asked why, I'm gonna explain why.
Okay.
Look, let's go back to, let's restate the motion.
As
The motion.
Now, it's to request 47,500. Wait, I got it, 25,000 for legal and 22,000 for roof, for a total of $47,000. And the roof request is 14,500 for task 4 and 5 plus a contingency of 7,500 for task 1 through 3.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote, Carl,
In favor, yay.
Pam,
Okay.
is that a yes?
It's kind of a yes, I'm just concerned about the realities that are gonna ensue at some point, but I guess we go back and put more money for legal,
So that's a yes.
I guess it's a yes.
David,
Yes.
Court,
Yes,
Rich,
Yes,
Kurt,
Yes.
I vote yes. Did I miss anybody? Okay, motion carries.
Paul,
Yes,
I'm probably stating the obvious, but I think it's really important the select board understand the effort we made here to try to quantify a number that this is best we can do now. There's a lot of moving parts in a complex project. They've got to hear that loud and clear, and I'm sure you'll bring that forth, as will Terry and Megan.
lots of moving parts and complex process.
Well, I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, the court's making a very, I would add, there may be contingencies that we have not understood yet, and this budget may need to be changed. I mean, I think there needs to be cautions about, all of it.
These are current, these are current needs. This is not a not to exceed promise.
Right.
Yeah, you can't, it'll be unfair to the select board, I think.
Okay, this is a discrete request. They're gonna have to vote on it. Make it clear that we may have additional funding needs in the future, which is probably true, whether it's this fiscal year or next.
Yeah, I think that just the nuances of how we talk about this become very important, especially if some of them become oral nuances. And I think it's court's point is that there needs to be emphasis on the uncertainties that may ensue here and not understate them.
I agree. I'm not a doctorate of nuance there, at least at the master's of nuance.
What's the term that Rumsfeld used? Unknown.
What's that?
If Rumsfeld used unknown unknowns.
No, exactly.
Okay, great. We're through that. Thank you. That was a tough discussion. Thank you very much. I want to turn here to the meetings, upcoming meetings. So EPA has the public meeting on October 11th. Kara's here to answer any questions, but what I have asked Kara to include in this, a slide in your packet, which I will share here. Screen. That's what that was. You can see it, yeah. This one slide, the purpose is because Karen EPA gonna talk about the cleanup. There's gonna be a lot of interest, but I want the public in attendance to know that there's committees in the town who have been working on it and are working on it specifically. There's this new guy in town, our task force, which is looking at whether the select board should acquire the site. Excellent. So this is the slide I put together. It's just one slide, and Kara's give me a thumbs up on including this in the presentation at the end. Just so the public doesn't start asking questions of EPA on these issues, and then we can kind of defer to the November 9th meeting is a little bit of an encouragement for us at our meeting that there's an upcoming November 9th meeting. So this is the slide I've included. A little bit of background, but largely it's come to November 9th. I don't know if there are any, we can change anything on here, nothing set in stone, it's just. Okay. Describing that, we got the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. This is to educate not only the public, but the Concord Bridge as well, so as they start to use these names. It was interesting, the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee got credit for everything that was done, including the reuse report. So congratulations. Okay, so this isn't a big deal. I think this is all pretty factual. Okay, we don't have to vote on this. It's just, this is in her meeting packet. So that's the EPA meeting. Any questions on this or?
Yes.
Kara, on the EPA meeting?
On that and the EPA,
Yeah, so I expect that some or all of us would attend there.
that's what I wanted to put
Yeah.
on the table, and then to what degree we wanna be, not discuss it afterwards or roll. I
Yeah, I-
started to coordinate with Kara, but that,
I
Yeah.
don't see us doing anything other than being there and listening.
Yeah.
If there are questions that we should be answering, but I can answer them at this meeting,
Right.
Kara may say, come to the November 9th meeting or something like that, right? Kara?
Yeah, so that was for us. Again, my goal for this meeting is very, started writing a blurb for the outreach materials we're gonna send out, it's gonna say that this is a overarching introduction to NMI to create a background knowledge that people don't have. So people who are not familiar with the site, you know, what they need to kind of know about it, to set the stage for you a bit, for your future meeting, and to bring up, you know, a general awareness of the site.
Oh, you don't wanna notice that meeting,
Sorry,
you don't wanna notice that meeting.
which meeting?
For the EPA, Would allow
Yes,
for-
Yeah.
yes, we wanna notice
Yeah,
that
we should
meeting,
notice
because there are a lot of
Well,
people that are
you-
interested, who
you-
will wanna know.
Right, so your committee will notice it, but is the task force gonna put an agenda or?
It's not our meeting.
It's not our meeting, it's
Right.
just an EPA meeting,
Right.
right? Yeah. So,
Whatever.
We can do in news and notices, and we can send it out to groups and stuff like that. You have a flyer for it?
Not yet,
It's gonna-
it's-
And is that gonna have the link?
Yes, it'll have a Zoom link to the meeting with, you know, the recommendation coming first if you can, if not, here's the Zoom link, we'll
And
work with everyone.
so the other thing about that is there is gonna be some part of it that talks about for the people who knew how contaminated it was, how much it's not anymore. How many things have been removed that aren't.
Yeah, I mean, we're
there.
gonna talk through kind of like the site process, right, that, you know,
Yeah.
this is where it started. This is the work that's been done on the removal programs, this is what the rod said. And this is where we are in our cleanup right now, and this is where we're going. We're kind of just hitting each of these topics, not diving into the kind of design details as much as we can. And then suggesting people if they want to learn the design details, we can do all that, but.
The article that I wrote for the bridge, which hopefully is gonna come out this week, it talks about both meetings, so.
Mhm.
I wanna get as much publicity for them, for EPA's meeting and our meeting. You know, I want the town to be engaged in this, and to show up and to ask questions, and so. David, to your point, we can start hearing from them, we can get feedback, it's not the only public outreach we're gonna do, but we can start with these two meetings. The first one, we're gonna listen to everybody, the second one, we're gonna listen more, but probably respond the second meeting, so we should notice our meeting on November 9th. It should be it is a public meeting. So you take care of that, I don't have this stuff.
I'll do that, yeah. I was just, I mean, for the EPA meeting, it was just, if the task force wants to deliberate at any point during the EPA's meeting, they have to put out an agenda before you, so.
Right. We're not gonna deliberate. David,
as the journalist in the group, I would strongly recommend not relying on the bridge alone.
I've learned that, yes.
Not for their accuracy or inaccuracy, which is a separate issue, and we can talk about that later. They won't reach everybody.
Yeah.
They won't be, it goes to every house, and sometimes it wraps fish. And sometimes people read it, and sometimes people read all of it, and most of the time they don't. So in terms of reaching people, and I was gonna ask this to Kara, is there extra help that you might need or want? In terms of suggestions as to other groups to send notices to, or, you know,
Yeah.
but just putting out the public notice just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, if anyone has a suggestion, send it to myself and to Zanetta. I mean, right now, we're gonna talk to the town, we have the site mailing list. And a minimum postcard will go out to, I think it works out to about 3/4 of a mile around the site. I tried to get kind of all of the neighboring neighborhoods in their entirety that border the site. But, you know, we're not gonna send postcards to the whole town to
Of course
cover.
not, I don't know. But there might
But
be
anyone
groups.
else that you know for kind of email purposes, we can send it to, we can send a flyer to,
Yeah. and
by all
I
means.
don't have better suggestions than me, but there might be specific groups that would be of interest, that might draw new people in and stuff like that.
Okay, Carl,
Yeah, so Kevin, does that mean you were sending it out to like Acton and Maynard residents as well in that?
If they fall in the
Yeah.
postcard purposes, if they fall in that area,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And we'll send it to, to Acton has been involved, so they'll get notice, we'll send it to the town of Acton, the town of Maynard, or, but, not to the general public in those towns.
Yeah,
Are you gonna
that
use
does raise an issue a little bit for November 9th meeting and what,
Well, let's talk about
but
that.
at some point,
Are you gonna use social media at all, next door or something like?
EPA is not good at social media. For my
And I think as a flyer that's going to have links in it and a QR code.
Yeah.
And the information for actually
Mhm.
logging into the hybrid meeting.
Exactly,
In the flyer that we can pass around electronically, right?
correct, yes, you can post it on a Nextdoor or Facebook group or anything like that. We don't have that capability for the most part. Well, not aware of it.
Okay. Let's flip to the November 9th meeting, so, we are online November 9th for our first public meeting. 7 o'clock at the meeting room here, the concept of this meeting is basically an information meeting. The idea would be, we would describe who we are and what we're doing, so I haven't really thought this out great, but I would kick it off about the task force, why we exist. I think that each work stream would talk, and I introduce how we're doing this, each work stream would talk about what they're doing, how they're doing their work. We would be we'd be long on information, short on findings and conclusions. And just to let the public know, this is what we're doing, we're taking all this into account. And then we ask for questions and comments and we listen. And whether we respond at that meeting or take it under advisement depends on the nature of the question, because we don't have all the answers, right? But we need to listen. So David, I think this is the first opportunity, if we do this right, to get people to understand what's on people's minds, and then we can fashion the communication strategy based on what we hear in part. So that was the idea for that meeting, and hopefully we get good attendance and input and suggestions. So I'd like to, we're gonna have some more detailed discussions in our subsequent meetings about, we need to orchestrate this a little bit more. So one of our next 2 meetings, we need to devote mostly to that, but I just wanted to introduce that here. We decided last meeting we're gonna do this. And I put a little bit of meat on it just now, so any thoughts on this, what we wanna do or not wanna do at this public meeting?
I would second the description that you just offered for how it goes, and when we talk about it in more detail. We can talk about how you frame it, and we're really here mostly to listen, language like that. Setting that aside, as I wrote in my note to you from the hospital, in the ICU with COVID.
It was very coherent, by the way.
5 days, yeah, but it took some work, actually, to go stop there. My thinking was that we do our research first so that we can anticipate what kind of concerns might come up, and we strategize for that before the meeting. But now that things are scheduled as they are, I still think it's my responsibility to find out as much as I can in advance of that meeting, what's likely to pop up. But I think in preparing for the meeting, this is a broad point, we can get to the specifics later. We do need to anticipate. We do need to respect what concerns may already be there that walk in the room. That don't, we need to be ready for that too. So broadly, conceptually, this outreach that I had suggested come first. I don't expect it's going to be a real big deal, as I've said in various places and to all of you guys. I think the words that are boogeyman words and fear words are not as big a deal. And this comes from Pam, this comes from you, this comes from a lot of people, are not the big boogeymen that they were at the beginning. Radiation, nuclear, all of that sort of stuff. So I don't anticipate those bombs, being crude with my language, being of as deep concern as they were. But we need to anticipate that they may be, for some people still. And incorporate that into what the meeting is, how we think about what the meeting is.
Yeah.
We can't address all those concerns there. I think you're absolutely right in terms of your concept of meeting. information gathering and so forth and listening, and here's just what we're about. We'd be wise to be knowledgeable before the meeting about that stuff. Running on it.
You know, I think, some of the concerns are obvious. They don't just range from risk and safety, they're fiscal. And there are people that think we can't afford to do this, the bit of priorities in town. It has nothing to do with risk and safety. It's the priorities, it's capital, where do we put our money? Is the site worth it? That sort of thing. But I think in general, there are a lot of misinformation, misperceptions about the site. So I think the EPA meeting and our public meeting will start to correct those. So that, so the concerns can get focused on real issues as opposed to fantasy issues like, you know, the entire site is radioactive, which is absolutely not, but that's been out there for a long time.
And to your point, I've talked to several people who say things like, I don't think it's right that the town should acquire land that's been contaminated and put poor people there for moderate income housing. I don't want them to cut down more trees, but knowing all of this makes this November 9th meeting more likely to be more successful.
Yeah, and maybe we'll hear some of this, maybe we won't, you know, but they're out there. So Pam.
I would be very, very wary of giving too much back now in terms of our points of view or what we know or don't know. I think it would be a big mistake and it would undermine the basic purpose of this task force. So I realize it's so tempting to give answers or give points of view or say this is what we think or I think, but I think we have to be very careful to try to avoid that. It's mostly, I think it's what you said, it's introductions, it's what it's about, what it is in relation to other task forces, and whatever our plans are going forward. Largely procedural without, I don't think, a lot of content, because that again is contrary to what our purpose is. The other question I have, which is simply wondering how many times has the public had a public meeting about this site? There must be many of them.
So the public meetings that we've had about the site in the past, many of them are the EDA public meetings where they have updated things before it was a Superfund site. They were DEP led meetings, state led meetings, and then there were the meetings with the reuse committee.
Those are work, you know, they were workshops.
Yeah.
There was.
Generally, there haven't been public meetings that have been by the town's committee.
I see. Okay.
We have presented things to the town meeting, and so there have been presentations at public hearings for finance committee, planning committee, board of appeals, things like that, but there haven't been. The reuse committee was the only one that really sponsored public meetings that were from the town.
Do you expect, I'm sorry, do you expect that that's a fair and good answer to the question, but it's a little bit bureaucratic in my mind. Is that going to matter to folks outside? They don't care whether it was a DEP meeting or a town meeting, how many people came to all of those sorts of things and what was in their head when they did it. What's the basis of public input on this?
So maybe
When we were doing meetings that were public hearings to other committees and EPA was doing their meetings beginning, the site was a mess.
Right.
And people were trying to get it cleaned up,
Right.
which was a whole different point of what we're doing now. So I'm not sure it matters at all. And in a lot of ways, it's a whole new generation of people that are talking about this. I was at the Concord Conservation Coffee this morning.
Yeah.
And they are all, people are like, oh, a meeting where they're talking about what's new at the site, what, for those of us who have no idea about this site, there was a lot of interest in that group.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna discuss this meeting. I want to move on a little bit, but I just want to second what Pam is saying about opinions. I think the focus here is, I want to make sure the public knows that we are thoroughly researching the decision on whether to acquire the site we're doing it 4 different ways. We're looking at all these issues. None of that is opinion. This is what we're doing. So I want to reassure the public that we're leaving no stone unturned financially or legally or safety wise. We're looking at all those. I think it's an important message that'll come through in the meeting. And secondarily, if there are factual questions, like the one I just said, you know, the site has XYZ contamination all over the place, but we kind of have to correct that if it's factual. And if we can correct it, but that's not opinion, you know.
And unless we, right, forgive me for nuance, but be very careful about.
Yeah, we gotta be careful, but
overstating. In the introduction of inadvertently, implicitly, even our own opinions on this stuff at this point.
we have to be careful, as I say,
Really tricky, yeah.
if we can correct some factual statements, that's. Should be the limit of what we do at the November 9th meeting.
I'll
David,
repeat this again when we talk about the meeting more specifically, but when we say here are our four work streams, we need to reiterate a lot of times, especially when people make their suggestions. There may be stuff that we should look into that you can think of. Thank you. That's what this meeting's about.
Yeah.
This feeling of inclusion and empowerment and control, that feeling is why we're holding the meeting, legitimate, one of them. And so when a question is asked, are you looking into this or that? Thank you. This is exactly what we were hoping to get.
Yeah.
That kind of tone.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay,
So I think it's important to actually make it clear that we're taking it seriously, that we're not just depending on other people's information. And I'm wondering if that means that we want to have the town lawyer there to also say what he's doing to investigate the site. And the risk assessors who are working on the contract, the reuse,
I don't want them there.
you don't want them.
This is a task force meeting, we should, I'll have a slide which says we are working with town council, we're working with group. But I want to keep this kind of simple,
Okay.
you know, I want to say, this task force is doing all this, we'll have follow-up meetings that maybe Rue or Ted. You know, we talked about follow-up meetings and there was no consensus when and how we should do that, but I think we will.
Well, I think.
I want to keep this simple.
Yeah, I think on that, I mean, just think about questions of liability. If somebody says, you know, what is our risk? I mean, I think we're saying, we're not answering that. We're not saying, here's what we think right now the risk is. I would answer by saying, we're working on that. We're developing our responses with town council and.
And
We
paying
want-
our own risk assessor to review this.
Yeah, so the key is that, and I hope this is true for all of the answers, that we're just saying, this is how we're working on what you're talking about. And not leaving, it is so tempting to try to show, you know, I mean, it's really scary, because we can do that. There are a lot of people who know stuff in this room, but I think we have to be very careful not to. So on my area that I'm involved with court, again, if somebody asks about liability, I'm saying we're working on it. And we're at early stages and we have excellent town council and blah, blah, blah.
And thank you for the
And
suggestion.
absolutely, thank you very much. Keep the input coming or whatever.
Okay, so we'll have a discussion, further deeper discussion. Any other,
If they're in the meeting, soon your batteries will be more.
what? My battery's low.
That's a way to end the meeting. That's a way to get the call.
So this plug isn't working.
Yeah, it's 9:30.
Just have one suggestion for future meetings, not these two coming up, but to continue having opportunities to visit the site. I have found that tremendously useful just to get a sense of the lay of the land, what an opportunity it is. Just based on the size and kind of
Yeah.
the natural beauty of the location.
One of the things that I will suggest when we plan to meet in more detail is ways that the public can continue to input and hear from us and have contact with us. That's an empowering thing as well. So that. Yes, I second that. And then more, even more. If you have a question, who to send it to, is that?
Is there an active plug down here? So I don't.
This is working.
Is it?
I think so. Yep.
Uh-oh, maybe just got longer.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't need to prolong the meeting anyway. So, okay, that's the meeting. Three last things. I want to look at the minutes from August 8th. Have you had a chance to look at those minutes, everybody? Okay, any comments or changes on the minutes?
I thought it was a faithful rendering of what we did. I move to approve.
Okay, Rich is getting better and better at time. He's been professional here. Okay, thank you. Did I hear a motion to approve?
Yes.
Gordon, any second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay,
Aye.
minutes are approved. I want to briefly discuss before I get to public comment and ask Terry for comment. Our next meeting, I suggested that there are several conflicts on September 26th. And there was a mixed reaction to October 3rd. I know Pam, you're gonna be out of the country. Gary Climate couldn't make the 26th anyway, so I'm suggesting our next meeting is October 3rd. And that would be at 7:30 PM. Is that? Should we plan on that?
Would
Yes.
that then make the 17th and 8 o'clock an 8 AM meeting?
Well, here's the, do we want to keep the 8 AM meetings or do we want to go back to this evening meetings? What is, I forget the rationale.
I'm very much in favor of morning meetings, but 7:30 would even be better, actually, I think.
So,
But,
yeah.
no, can't do it.
We're already pressing my bedtime, right? No, I'm joking.
No, it
Anytime
doesn't-
is
My
fine.
bedtime is
Yeah.
at 9 PM and I get up at 5, so, but anyway, I just would, I liked that kind of, toggling back and forth, but. It's up to you.
Well, I'm suggesting October 3rd meeting is in the evening.
Great.
And then we have one other meeting before the public meeting. And that'll be either on the 17th or the 24th of October. We can decide on that now, or we can wait till our meeting on the 3rd. Is there any preference for the 17th or the 24th of October?
I'd like 17th. I'm trying to avoid school committee meetings.
Okay,
Jeez.
okay, so 17th,
That would put
at
us
8
two, that would put us 2 weeks after October 3rd. And that would be a morning, Paul?
Yeah, I think that was sort of the suggestion here.
5 AM would be better.
Okay, so
Okay.
7:30 on the October 3rd and 8 AM on the 17th. And the 17th meeting will be devoted to the preparation for the November 9th meeting, at least, that'll be on the agenda. Okay, we in agreement on those. Great, thank you. That unconflicts several of us on the 26th.
Send a memo around, because for the people who aren't like here and right
Are you gonna update the invitation?
Yeah, we'll update it. Thank you. And public input, Terry Ackerman or Terry.
No comments. Great meeting as always. Thank you for your service.
Okay, any other public comment? Brad, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Brad Hubbard Nelson from 221 Nashotah Road, and I'm chairing the Climate Action Committee. And I thank you all for working on this. It's hard to keep up with this issue that's been going on for years, and I'm trying to pay attention. So we're working pretty closely with the Solar Siting Task Force, and we definitely will advocate at the right time for using the very large solar potential on that site. That's it's an opportunity that that we may want to take advantage of. I just wanted to mention we will be meeting on October 3rd in the evening in that room that you're in now, the Climate Action Committee, in case that you are counting on using that room. I just wanted to say thank you, and we'll be trying to pay attention to what's going on. And if you're doing outreach to groups, to include the sustainability director in our committee at the right time, certainly we would appreciate that.
Could I ask a question, Brett? So
Sure.
you're saying in addition to talking to Concord Power and Light, we should be talking to sustainability and
Yes.
the solar committee? Okay.
Right, because Concord Power and Light certainly has a great understanding of the potential of that site. It's right near the transformer and stuff. But there is a sense that Concord Power and Light isn't always working as hard on getting new solar resources as we think they should. I mean, that's why we have a solar siting task force now, is to kind of help them find these opportunities.
Okay, I'll write you and set up a meeting.
I think that is, so you mean the municipal light board, light plant? You mean the municipal light plant? Howard Light is municipal light, okay, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Also, I think in light of the comments about the light plant, the light board would be a very good place to go at some point to get input on solar, I think. The board as well as the plant staff.
Okay, great, thanks a lot for your comments. The use of that site in part for solar has been on the table for a long time. It's a big site, big opportunity.
There you go.
Thank you. Any other public comments or any other comments before? Pam Rockwell.
So I went to I talked this morning with Jane Prentice, who, it turns out, we've talked about the Sperry Superfund site on Route 117 in Sudbury as potentially being similar, where they have some industrial use, they have some conservation land, they have some residential that they're developing over an old Superfund site. It turns out Concord actually owns part of that site. It backs up to White Pond, and Jane Prentice is in fact our land steward there. So we actually have sort of another model of what owning this part of the Superfund site is like. That was we've owned part of that since 1997. The part that we own is used entirely as conservation land to protect area around White Pond, because they were going to extend those condos all the way up. And so
Interesting.
I was not aware of that.
I was not aware of that either. I've been
I
talking
knew
about
about
this site as being a model for us because of Sudbury, and not realizing we actually own.
Well, I knew of the Sperry site. I didn't realize that was an NPA. Is that an NPA site?
They also have a Google site.
Oh,
And it's not really quickly.
So it's not an NPL site.
So, correct, it's not on the NPL, but it's part of the Superfund program. under the Google.
Right, big difference.
So very.
And those differences are more than bureaucratic.
Those are big differences.
What the boogeyman words are there and all of those sorts of public perception things are, the people who want to protect White Pond were very vigorously involved in that.
Oh, you do remember that?
I do, and I had some friends who were involved, and it's the only reason I stumbled upon knowing anything about it. And then the solvents and the contaminants that were there, and the nature of it is a model to some degree, but a limited model.
Also, it's.
Institutional controls and things don't pop up as much. Yeah.
I mean, it's really important to distinguish the NPL status versus brownfield status, really different concepts.
But it's useful to know, sure.
Okay, I want to thank you all for a very productive meeting. I want to thank especially David and Kurt for kind of meeting with the roof people and straightening out our numbers, so Megan and I don't get slaughtered on Monday. And any other comments? Okay, then call the meeting adjourned, and we'll see you on the 3rd. Thank you all.